Lisa Diener comes to town. She moves to Las Cruces in the 80s, late 80s. She had been in Germany on exchange as an undergraduate student, is riding her bike around town and is thinking about cinemas in Europe and how much she missed small, intimate cinemas in Europe. And as she was thinking that, one day she was driving past the Fountain Theater and thought, gosh, wouldn't it be a great venue for a small intimate theater like we have in Europe. So she collected about 5 or 6 of us and said, I'm really interested in this. She was probably in her mid-20s at the time and had the audacity to think, why don't we start this? And I would guess that was probably the summer of 1988 when we started to think about what are our options? Can we really do this? And she made a very important choice on the board of somebody who was an accountant in town, Norm Fristow. And Norm was the person who was able to help us think about how do we finance something like this. So I was involved kind of from that very early moment, from the start. So we opened on, I think it was February 4th, 1989.
Jeg vil leve en fransk middag. En fransk middag.
I was kind of the second primary worker. So after work every day I would come over, we would open the theater, we would run a movie, and then we would go home 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and then I would go to work next day, work all day, would pick up dinner, come to the theater. So I was kind of the primary volunteer, the voluntary coordinator for the first 5 years of the organization. We had tons of people who used to come from Juarez and El Paso, in addition to people from Las Cruces who came. So we knew that it was an important venue for people in the region, not just Las Cruces. It was hard work, but we also knew that we were changing the lives of people in Las Cruces.
My name is Rosanna Hernandez. I've been involved with the theater since 1989. Started out as a box office volunteer and then kind of imposed myself on the board and made myself a secretary because I realized that they didn't have a secretary, so I thought, well, that could be me. When we went from executive director to being a board run, we were told that it could not happen, that the theater, Mesilla Valley Film Society, could not be run by a working board. And we thought, you know, for me, that's just enough. When somebody tells me I can't do something, that's when I do it. We were in debt. I took over the checkbook as well. So I took over that, and we were over $25,000 in debt. And so I just contacted our distributors and all the local people who we owed money to and told them, you know, I'm going to be paying you $50 a month, you know, until we get back on our feet. And it took us 18 months to get out of debt. And I thought that was great.
We were shoestring, and about every 4 to 6 months we needed to have a blockbuster in order to keep the doors open. We showed The Last Temptation of Christ, and that was one of the big ones. That allowed us to stay open. I don't know that we were ever on our last legs, but we were limping. There were some months when we were limping pretty seriously. And then we had The Last Temptation of Christ, and that put us back in business probably for a year.
The way we used to do scheduling was we would just put calendars up and people would drop into the theater and write their name on. And that, for me, that was just, we would have days when nobody would be signing up for concessions and nobody would be signed up for box office. Or somebody would write their name in to work and somebody else would come in and erase their name and put their name in because they wanted to work that day.
I've always been interested in film, art house films particularly, and one of the reasons I chose Las Cruces as a place to retire was because they had an art house film theater here and NPR. And I was looking for an opportunity to contribute to the community as a volunteer. The Mesilla Valley Film Society was the most appealing to me. I joined the Film Society in 2004 as a volunteer projectionist. And after a couple of years, I joined the board. 6 out of the last 7 years, I've been president of the society.
Mira, we're very lucky today. Mira.
I love movies. I had an older sister, and I used to spend my summers in Los Angeles, and she would take me to a theater called the Tahoe La Brea. Got introduced to Akira Kurosawa, so I saw Seven Samurai, I saw Iran, I saw Ikaru, I saw there, so that just, those were my standards for movies. And I think the theater, the Fountain Theater and Mesilla Valley Film Society is doing that, bringing quality films, films that I want to see. So I wanted to make sure that it stayed around.
One of my other favorite films here was Red Sorghum. Very famous Chinese filmmaker. It was one of his first films, and I think it was one of the first films where I was so struck by color and shape. I'm a pretty narrative-driven person, right? And I remember thinking both of those is that there's something being told here simply in the use of color or the use of shape.
A desert road from Vegas to nowhere.
I brought a weekly film series that I had started over at the New Mexico Farm and Ranch Heritage Museum, and I brought it over to the Fountain Theater, changed the format a bit, and called it Cinematinee, and it was every Saturday afternoon films that were overlooked, films that I liked, a lot of New Mexico made movies, a mixture of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, different events. I became the promotions person on the board for several years, and we had speakers and filmmakers and all sorts of different things come through the theater, and it was a pretty fun time. Burning Plain was a film that was half shot in Las Cruces. Guillermo Gallaga, the director, had come to Las Cruces to shoot part of a previous film, and he liked it, and he made it a point to come back to Las Cruces to shoot that film. I contacted the distributor, Magnolia Pictures, who I was pretty friendly with. Neil, the person I dealt with there, gave us an advanced screening of the film without charge, and he arranged for Mr. Arriaga to come as our guest. And he did so, and it was a really, really successful event.
We do show a lot of films that are very worthwhile. The community appreciates seeing them, and there's no other venue to really see these films in a community setting where people are sitting together, able to discuss the film before and after, and experience it as a group experience.
It is alive, like all things, like the trees, the rocks, the river. You must speak to it before you take it from its home. Oh, you who dwell here by the river.
You that dwell here by the river.
We lift you to make good medicine.
We lift you to make good medicine.
There is a beauty in the time of day and the time of night, and there is peace in the river and in the hills. Ultima taught me to listen to the mystery of the living earth and to feel complete in the fulfillment of its time.
We're actually very happy renting the theater. It's not the perfect theater building, but it has a lot of charm.
We struggled with the facility because it really hadn't been kept up for a long time. So it is true, I think it was over there, the ceiling fell down and we had to It was pretty serious. I think when Nancy came on board, they got up on the roof and found some pretty scary, like stuff had to be reinforced. It had to be reinforced immediately.
And since the renovation that just happened this year, some of the big problems with the theater were addressed, air conditioning being the most significant one. But we've done several upgrades to make the presentations, the films we show, better. And the biggest and newest change is going to all digital cinema. We've retired our 35mm projector, and we have a very good system now.
We are, if not the only art house in the world, in the country, that is run completely by volunteers. So I would like to thank all of our volunteers.
We do have volunteers that have invested a lot of time and effort into the success of the Film Society. Roseanne was one of the original volunteers when the Film Society was founded, and she's still very active. She's our treasurer and wears several other hats as well. Kelly has been our programmer for 12 years or so, I believe. We have a couple new board members, Betty and Pat, who are making their great contributions. Our contribution to the community is very significant. I think we're a real treasure for the community. And it's volunteers that have kept us going for 25 years, and I think it's volunteer effort that will keep us going in the future. You do really make a difference by volunteering here. You know, there's a very direct relationship to your efforts and the success of the Film Society.
There used to be a couch back there when there was room. I don't know why people sat on it. It was not a nice couch.
There was a time when a lot of film ended up on the floor. The movie had to be stopped. The film had to be sorted out, and it took a few minutes of intense effort to get it back going again. Our audiences have been quite forgiving and patient.
Whenever it rained, the electricity would go out, and not just at the theater, but on the whole block. So we had a bunch of candles, table candles, that were always in the box office closet. Whenever the electricity went out, we would just put the candles out and start chatting and wait for the electricity to come back on. But most people stuck it out. They just hung around and visited, and then the movie would start and we'd finish the movie.
And one of the board members, I think it was Mike Mandel. I think that he was the one who heard of or read about a Baptist church in El Paso who wanted to get rid of their seats. And so he called and said, "We'll take them." So some of the board members went down with their trucks and brought back the seats, and they were just on planks. And so when somebody moved, the whole row would move. So that was fun. And later they got nailed down, so you can't rock in them anymore.
Some of the most important volunteers are the projectionists. It was a skill that made me too nervous to learn it. Bob Pedicolis was kind of the chief projectionist for a long time. And Bob was just always available. If something went wrong with the projector, Bob was kind of our go-to guy in terms of trying to get it fixed. Organizations like this, you don't often make it, right? Businesses like this don't make it. So for it to be 25 years, I think that's phenomenal. And speaks to, the efforts of the early people, right? Saying, how do we make it going? But it also speaks to the efforts of volunteers for 25 years. I think that's amazing.